So yeah, so the second topic is the meaning of the Ankh. And so this is something that it just irks me because I keep seeing these memes and all kinds of stuff written on the Ankh. And I saw a video not too long ago, even though the video's old, of Erykah Badu talking about the meaning of the Ankh and some stuff that she read on the internet. And nobody was really looking at this seriously. And because, you know, we don't speak Egyptian natively and we're not in our African historical space, you know, a lot of us guess. And what happens is, you know, if our guesstimations seem to make sense to us, then we just roll with it. And that's what a lot of people have done, you know, with this word Ankh. So not only the word Ankh, but what the symbol of the Ankh is, how it evolved, and what it means, and how it relates to the symbology of it all. But the word which we pronounce in English as Ankh, that's not how the ancient Egyptians pronounced it, but us in English, we pronounce it Ankh. And we understand its fundamental meanings, or at least one of the meanings, to mean life. And Ankh is just like the word Kemet. Ankh has a whole bunch of different meanings if you're just looking at the consonant clusters. But they obviously have different vowels and they have different meanings. And so we can't assume that just because we see an Ankh symbol that it automatically means life in every context in ancient Egyptian. That's not the case. But the word Ankh in general, when you see this symbol, is primarily a word for life, to be alive, Anku, the living, or human beings, people, a person, an inhabitant of a place, a citizen, a living one, and, you know, again, just these different determinatives. So, or, you know, these central determinatives. So this isn't a singular, a man, a person. And then when we're talking about people in general, just like what we saw in that Kemet glyph, we see the plural, the man and the woman, with the plural sign that we see here. And here's another variation of it, dealing with a population of people in general. And so this is the fundamental meaning, you know, of Ankh as we know it. Now, here are some common hypotheses for the inspiration of the design of the Ankh and its meaning. And so this is the most common that I've seen. And that is the Ankh symbol really in real life represents a womb of a woman juxtaposed or stacked upon an aspect of the phallus of a man. And or like in the case on the case on the left, they also incorporated, and this is from Amen per Ankh blogspot.com, that there's sunset and sunrise. I don't know where they got that from. And that this is the fallopian tubes, and that's the inspiration. And then you see on the right hand side the quote unquote true mystery of the Ankh revealed: the male and female reproductive organs combined. And so they look at some body parts and it somewhat resembles the Ankh, and so that must mean it, because allegedly life, not allegedly, but we know that life goes through the fallopian tubes of a woman, and then of course sperm coming through the reproductive channel known as the phallus. And so these two memes and other memes are spread all over social media, and you know, this is the meaning that Erykah Badu was talking about in her interview that you will find on the web. So I totally reject this, you know, for reasons which will be announced in a little bit. And so the second hypothesis comes from our good brother Reggie, you know, out of New York, from the House of Consciousness family. And what he does here is he takes the word Ankh as spelled in English and treats it as an anagram, meaning that every single letter represents, the beginning of a word. And so he has a website or a blog called thesecretoftheankh.com. And this is, some of his representation. So what he argues is that each, letter in the word Ankh, represents a deity in ancient Egyptian cosmology. And therefore, like Amen, Amenet, Nun, Nunet, Ket, Keket, Het, Het, Het. Meaning the hidden, the revealed, I guess the inert, the non-inert, darkness and light, eternity and finiteness, if I remember correctly, which y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. And I forgot the aspect in which this was, but he was trying to make some point here. But see, there's a fundamental problem with this. And so as we see here, he's basing his assumptions on how the word Ankh is spelled in English. And this is not how you pronounce Ankh. First of all, these are 4 letters. And if you can see at the bottom of the screen here, I have the actual consonant sequence here. So we have this sound here, N, and then this K sound. And so this K sound, which is the H with a loop under it, is often translated or transliterated in English as KH. And so this KH is supposed to be a simultaneous articulation, a single sound, not 2 separate sounds. So this automatically nullifies, method-wise, his assumption that you can break this down into an anagram, that this has some kind of value. And then, even Ankh is spelled wrong, here. But I copied this directly from the site. But, and then secondly, this is not an A sound. The Egyptians didn't write out their vowels. This is in K or in H sound. H in H, hawk, like in hawk or lok, And so we pronounce Ankh wrong. Ankh is a convenient pronunciation for us in English, but that's not how you would pronounce it in ancient Egyptian. And so this anagram is just totally wrong, no matter how you look at it. And so this is a triliteral, meaning it's only 3 consonants in sequence, and he made it into a quadriliteral, 4 consonants, 3 consonants and a vowel, which it wasn't. So that's the first thing. And then he continues on. It's a whole article, a whole page. And so now he equates the Ankh with Einstein's equation of E equals mc squared. This is just an example of when we're not grounded in, proper methodology, the lengths that will go to try to explain something that is actually very simple. And so he writes here, this expression represents a wave traveling at the infinite speed, time, separating darkness, light, creating a hidden Amen evolutionary train of events. This is featured as Neb Kepara inside of the Ankh loop. See, what he really doesn't understand is that the reason why that Ankh is in, that Keper is in the loop here is because the sign that is normally represented as Keper can also be pronounced quote unquote Ankh. And so it's a play on words here. And has nothing to do with what he's trying to equate here in some quantum physical reality. that just is, you know, the falsification of, excuse me, let me go back, getting ahead of myself here. The falsification of this sequence here nullifies any and every single thing that he wrote on his page, because everything is based off of this. And so because this has been falsified, this is also falsified, because you just can't get that from the actual language itself. And so lastly, is this was based off of a personal communication. And I wrote this in my article from an author by the name of Legacy Allen, who argues that the ancient Egyptian language is really the Amharic language, what survives today as the Amharic and Tigrinya languages found in Eritrea today. And so he argued that the Ankh symbol comes from, or the inspiration of his design comes from, the Masab tables in Ethiopia, Eritrea, commonly you see in restaurants in which they eat from. We can clearly see that it has somewhat of a similar shape, but when you really look at it, it looks nothing like the Ankh whatsoever. And it's not even called an Ankh or anything in the sequence. It's just falsified. And you know, this is what we call in our circles, lookership. So if it looks like it's something, then it must be it. And so we can't go with lookership in 2017. This is falsified as well. And so hold on a sec. So now what my argument is that and this is what I argued in my 2013 work, alluja, that word that we was introduced to at the beginning, that the Ankh, the symbol itself, derives from the human body as well as an animal bovine body, because they're similar in terms of this stretch here. And that is the thoracic complex of the human body. And so it is confirmed visually by this artifact, and there's many of them just like this, where the Ankh symbol is juxtaposed by the Djed pillar and the wasp scepter. And we see here the 4 columns, top columns here, this represents the spinal cord. And it's used for words for spine, and this is the spine of Osiris. And so you have the spinal cord here, and then the loop of the neck, the collarbones here, and the sternum. This is what you see here in this rendition of the human body here. You see that same collar, the spine here. The loop here is that what's called the final rib. And then, you know, the line, which you see here, is the collarbones. And then the sternum. It's a representation, it's symbolic of the human body, but more specifically the thoracic complex, which protects your lungs. And this will become important because every single time, well, I'm not going to say every single time, a good number of times you will see the Ankh symbol, first of all, being held by either kings or deities. And when it's being held by a deity and it's being in the company of a king, which we can see here based on this nimbus crown here with the cobra snake, this is a king, and I forgot which king it is, but we see the god Anpu or Anubis, which is Mbwa in Chiluba, a word meaning dog, that he is giving the Ankh and presenting it to his nose. Now, if this was a womb or a phallus, why would you be sticking a penis and a vagina womb to somebody's nose? Again, that doesn't make any sense. That's not what's being going here. this concept of life is dealing with the physical human body and simultaneously breath. The cognate for quote unquote Ankh in the Zande language, another Negro Egyptian or Chiena Intu language, is honga. Remember what I said, that this is an H or a K sound in H. And this H corresponds, you know, saying to G, NG, in that fashion. And so this is honga, to breathe. Other confirmations of what I was speaking of. And so you see here, Het Heru, giving this queen here, holding her hand and presenting the Ankh to the nose. You see Anubis doing the same thing here. The Ankh to the nose. And as I mentioned here, you usually see deities or kings or people with royalty holding it in their hand. It's a symbol of power. I'm passing, I'm giving you vitality, I'm giving you life. That is what this symbolizes. But it symbolizes more specific to the breath. I'm putting my spirit in you. I'm putting my life force in you. The breath. That's what this is. I'm giving you blessings. That's another aspect of this, but we won't get into that. But I'm passing on, giving you blessings from the spirit world into the physical. This is what this is. And so in the article, I go more into the details of how we breathe and, you know, what these bones, why it's important to protect them and things of that nature. And all of that to show the correlation also between the Ankh symbol and breath. Because in the ancient Egyptian literature, you'll also see, for example, the deities Horus and Set tying these knots to this papyrus and forgot what plant this is. You know, representing upper and upper and lower Egypt. This here is the trachea of the body, you know, whatnot, or the breathing pipe. And this is the, you know, saying the heart or whatnot. And this is actually a hieroglyph, meaning it's a word sema, meaning the lungs. And so they're putting this knot, you know, here, but, you know, this is a drawing rendition, but this is the actual. And you notice in the drawing rendition, they forgot what's up top here. So if you just saw this drawing, you'd be missing a lot of information. What you see here is the top of the Ankh or the Shinu on top of the trachea in the lungs, which also helps to confirm this. And I can say that this is an Ankh right here on the trachea, even though it looks a little different than this, because the Ankh and this is just a variation of Sema, you know, the trachea, you know, saying lung complex. It's just an upside, like if you see it, it's upside down, in dealing with the human lungs. And I equate it to trees as well and the importance of trees. Got my slides a little mixed up. As I mentioned earlier, the word Ankh can also mean a beetle. And this is what you see here, and it's reaffirmed by the determinative for the beetle, which is also pronounced Kepper. And that's why you see it here in this representation, which is a mirror, Tutankhamun's mirror, the word, this Kepper beetle, because this is the Ankh. And of course, this Ankh, you know, there's a word Ankh meaning mirror. And so they're playing on words here. This is an actual mirror case with an Ankh meaning mirror that was actually in there at one time. But, you know, we have confirmation again in Kikongo, Ikoka, or Ikonga, a word meaning beetle. And again, K, K, and this one isn't nasalized, so it's just the N is dropped here, but it's the K sound for this sound here. And so further confirmation in Kikongo and into language is this word here, per Ankh, house of life, the name of a college of priests. This is the representation in the hieroglyphs, reading from right to left. This same phrase and the same institute is found in the Congo even to this day, and it's called Kukanga, the site of initiation, literally the institute that folds, ties, and unties principles of knowledge. This variant of Ankh, which is Hanga or Kanga, the variant of it is Zingu. The word Zingu means life, and this is based off of palatalization. Because of this I following the K sound, it was palatalized to Shi and then Z, or Z, Zingu, institutes of life. Life is where Sansulu means institute. Ku is a word for place. And I can show you that Ku is a variant of per. And, you know, based on Kiku and some other things, but I won't get into that at this moment. But this concept of initiation and tying principles of knowledge is important because the earliest Ankhs were also shown as tied pieces of rope. What am I doing here? Okay, there you go. As we can see here. And so that's why I showed that when you see the Shinu, I don't know what that was for. When you see the word Shinu, which is on the right-hand side, that's what you saw at the top of the sema, or the lung trachea hieroglyph that you saw Horus and Set tying earlier. That's on top of it. It's the same. It's just the top loop part of the Ankh. And so what you would call this here is Shin or Shinu, the elongated part. But it has to deal with ropes and tying. And so we have cognates in Chiluba, Shinga, Singa or Jinga, to bind, thread, roll up, knot, encircle, tie with a wire, to braid, to weave. That's exactly what you see in this glyph. You know, Mujinga, cord, reel, braided rope. That's what all of these are. These are tied knots, you know, saying here, dude. Anybody who knows Egyptian knows that these are ropes, tied pieces of ropes. And so the inspiration for the shape of this is twofold. One, the physical body in terms of the Ankh symbol, and then the tied piece of rope that you would wrap around one's waist. But then it was used in a different context, this symbol here meaning eternity and protection. And then when it's elongated, it means name, or it's a paronym for name. And why the pharaohs are written inside the Shini, but it's a tied piece of rope that you see here. So when it comes to the concept of life, in a larger article that I'm going to be doing on this again, I'm going to show you that the concept of the association between life, remember that Ankh can mean person, a living being. And that, but it's not just a living being, it's a living being in motion. The N2 framework has to deal with motion, life, vitality. So it's not just a physical body, because you can have a dead body, but it's a body full of breath. It is an animated body, an able body. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the word N2 is a variant of the word Ankh. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But here, you know, there's a philosopher by the name of Mugobe Ramose. And Ramose, that last name is cognate with what we know as Ramesses. But this is the Bantu. people in Southeast Africa who still have these names. Ramose, in his text on the concept of into, in a text called The African Philosophy Reader, edited by Coetzee and Roux, 2003, he says, African philosophy is consistent with the philosophic position that motion is the principle of being. According to this understanding, the condition of being with regard to every entity means that to be is to be in the condition of ness. Whatever that is perceived as a whole is always a wholeness in the sense that it exists and persists towards that which it is yet to be, because this is a characteristic of every existing entity. Being is to be understood always as a wholeness. And you should substitute the word being in this paragraph for into, because into means life. It means being. It means existent, an existing thing. And so this is what he's talking about. This whole article is on into. And so what he's saying is that into is not just simply a being, but it's a being in motion. Something can't exist, something isn't being unless it is in motion. And so we have cognates of the word Ankh without the ha prefix, that K or that ha prefix. The root is just NK. And in other African language, for example, the Ashanti language, when we say Ankh, we say Akua or Inkwa. It means life. And what you see here is one of the Akua dolls or Inkwa dolls. These are given primarily to women who want to have children. Either they want to have one soon or they can't have children. And so what they'll often do is the prescription is to tie this doll on your back and walk around with it for a time as if it was a real child, a real life, a real Inkwa, a real body, an existing thing. And then the spirit of a child will enter your womb. Of course, you have to be with a man and do what adult people do to facilitate that process. But this is fundamentally what, these representations are for. But you can see that they are also in the shape of an Ankh, reinforcing this notion of the Ankh that we see in ancient Egypt, because it has to deal with life, it has to deal with a body. And you can also see, even in this back of this rendition, the four pillars of the spinal cord, just like what we see in ancient Kemet, dealing with the spinal cord. That's all the way to the back of the head. That connects your skull to the rest of your body. And so this same phenomenon exists in West Africa. And so here are some different manifestations of this word in different languages. So in Proto-Bantu, we say Kua, an inhabitant, a person of. In Chikam or Egyptian, we'll say Ankh, a living person, an inhabitant, member of a group, a soldier. Chikam, Ankh, life. Anku, man. And then in the tree language, in the Ashanti, Inkwa or Kua, life. In the Duala Bantu language, Ong, life. In Kikongo, which we mentioned earlier, Zingu, life. In Kikongo again, Inkwa, self. And it also means life. In collagen, they say K without the N prefixes. The N is also a prefix. They say Ke, self. And there's a certain semantics that exists in Bantu or Chi-Bantu and Egyptian as well. So the word Ankh also means earth and land, as well as living person, inhabitant, member of a group, or a soldier. The root of Ankh is actually monosyllabic. It's actually this K sound. And this K corresponds also with Bantu Chi or Ki. This is a palatized variant of the word Ki. And so Ke became Chi or Ke or Ki became Chi. And just like what we find in ancient Egypt, earth, land, Proto-Bantu Chi ground, country, underneath. Chi, inhabitant, person of. Because in African and in Intu languages, there's a correspondence between the land and the people, which is why I should have put the hieroglyph here, which is why in the version of Kemet that we saw earlier, you saw the people as a determinative, because the semantics, the worldview sees the people and the ground in which they exist on is one and the same. So that's why you see those two people at the end of the word Kemet, because it's still referring to the land, the ground, the country. As we can see, even with another variant of the word of into in this word Ankh. And so I keep saying that the word into is in Egyptian. I gave a few examples, but I wanted to show here that it is monosyllabic, and that chi sound corresponds to in Chiluba, excuse me, in the Proto-Bantu that we saw earlier, to the h sound in Egyptian in the very word Ankh. When in a different dialectical variation, the h sound is this j sound, and so the this version is jit, body, self, and then you have jit, serf or servant, and then you have the fuller version winjit, people. Remember what I talked about, things existing. It all comes from the word into, meaning body, serf, and this is onto or onto, people, jit, gift, and then winjitwu, offerings, hajit, to burn, to roast, and then ja or jir, fire drill, jit, flood, widjit, a body of water, wujinu, flood, wujia, canal, wuju, cattle, or oju, cattle, oinju, or into, goats, winjuit, cattle herd. You can see from this monosyllabic root, when these other morphemes are added, it gives different context to the word. So we can see from starting from the left, going to the right, how it ends up in this form with the W, N, J, and then the suffix, you know, for these words. And so you can pause it, study it. And so we can see here that winjet equals Ankh. It's just a different dialectical variation. And so what I'm arguing here is that the roots for both of these words is the j, this j sound here for people, and h for people here. And that all of these graphemes are morphemes. And so they just expand, but you see the correlation in every single one. People, people, goats, goat herd, winju, offerings, unket, grain, unket, a product. And these were all given as offerings. You know, it's just word for food. And I can go through a whole series of correspondences where, remember that Egyptian is monosyllabic. And from these monosyllabic roots, they add different morphemes to create words or extended words. And so you see the same correspondence. For example, in Jew, protection, Kiwi, protection, because these correspond, these are different dialects. Matter of fact, they may just be different languages that were in ancient Egypt who were writing with the script. And so you have, you know, Anju, light of the sun, dawn, Anku, stars, coming from the word Anket, fire. All words for light of the sun and all that, and stars come from a word for fire. And so remember, we saw this root dealing with fire drill, you know, earlier. And so Anjut, vessel, Anjit, a bowl, a vessel, Jew, a pottery vessel. And then we have Ankh, a vessel for libations. And we can go on, and you'll see the same correspondences. So everywhere this J is, it corresponds to K here. And so when you see Winjit, and this is, you know, where we get another variant. And I gave the lesson earlier. Winjit or ontos is where we get, this is, you might as well say into. So this is what you say. This is their variant of it, into or inti. And so into is a variant of Ankh or inqua and unjit. But, you know, I can't show all the super details here, but in the article, you will see. And so lastly,